This is Kim Rowe with For the Nest, and this project was special to me because I found inspiration in a painting that my grandmother had painted way back in the 1970s. And when I saw this piece of furniture, I knew I wanted to do something special to it, but wasn't quite sure what until I saw that painting. So first I prepped the piece, and here's just a quick video of me. I take the drawers out, I wipe it down really well. I use Pure Power by Farmhouse paint, scrub it, and then use a clean cloth with water and wipe that all back. Then I added DIY Bohemian Blue as my base. Once the first coat was dry, I added the second coat of Bohemian Blue, mixed in a little bit of bead board, and that was the base. Then, once that was dry, I decided to use Fancy Farmgirl and Gypsy Green for my stems of the flowers. I had the painting of my grandmother sitting next to me to kind of give me direction, and I just went for it. This was one project that I definitely took me out of my box, and I tried doing some different things with this paint. I think one thing that you really have to embrace when you are painting something like this is the wispiness of it. That's the only word I can think of, but just free-flowing and not trying to be perfect, but really just letting the brush go and just using quick strokes to add these leaves and stems for the flowers. I then added, once I did the base color of green, I went back and added little highlights with cake batter, and then even using the Bohemian Blue colored in with the paint in between the stems, so it gave it more depth instead of just having a bunch of stems kind of coming out of the bottom. It just, when you add those different colors, it just gives a little bit more depth and texture to the piece of art. Really, I felt like this was something that was more of a piece of art than just a piece of furniture. This piece of furniture happened to have trim on the sides, and I think it's important to go off of that and really pull your design off into that trim. It's almost like painting on a mat of a painting, but it really gave a really cool and interesting look to this piece instead of trying to stay within that box. The first layer, I let that dry, and now I'm going back in with more Bohemian Blue to really add more depth. So trying to fill in between the stems with that darker color really made the stems pop more. And I'm using a pretty small brush here just to get into those areas. Looking at my grandmother's painting, I used that for inspiration and realized that she had quite a bit of yellow in with the green on the stems. So I used cake batter to highlight some of the edges of the stems. Then I took a small, almost like an old chip brush that was very stiff, and just put some weathered wood on the tip of that. Started with a little bit less and then added more just for the center of the daisies. Here I'm adding a a little bit of a base part of the daisy coming from the opposite end. So this is almost like looking at it from underneath. And so that's why I'm using more green here and more of a darker green, maybe mixed a little bit with the Bohemian blue. And then I will go in and start adding the petals. So the brush I used here was a blue ice brush, and I'm starting with bead board and just adding the petals onto those centers that I had started. And I found that this brush was actually perfect for the shapes of these petals, and it has a little bit of a point on it. I believe it's the number 8 blue ice brush, and I was really excited about how this turned out and how the brush worked perfectly for my project here. Once I added the bead board, I went right back in and pulled a little bit of the weathered wood onto my brush and then slightly highlighted just areas in the middle of the petals to just give some almost shadowing and depth to those petals. Next, I took my cake batter on that same little chip brush and just added a tiny bit of yellow into the center of the daisy, and then I'm going in now and adding that Bohemian blue behind these flowers to really make them pop. I saw that it was a little dry, so I tried to use my hand at first to spread it, but then I realized I needed a little bit of water, so just using that fine mister, I misted the paint, and it reactivates it as it's wet, and it just helps move that around a little bit better. But I was really happy about how that Bohemian blue in the background, it actually had a little bit mixed in with, I believe, some of the fancy Farmgirl. I had my palette, and I wish I had taken a picture of the palette, but just had all those paints on there, and as you're working you kind of just keep going and layering, and it was a lot of fun. Another thing that you want to do when you're painting these flowers is make them all look a little bit different. Obviously, each flower is so unique, and not all the petals are going to be the same. And so adding some that were maybe more of a smaller flower, some that maybe weren't quite bloomed all the way, I actually also added in here, kind of make it look like maybe Queen Anne's lace, or I was just trying to do something a little bit different and trying to make that hiding behind one of those stems. Was funny, as I was painting some of these flowers, at first I wasn't happy with how they were looking and got a little worried, but then I just kept moving and adding more, and I was actually pleasantly surprised at the outcome of this whole project. I encourage you just to try something different, and sometimes it comes out more amazing than you thought, and maybe even surprise yourself in what you can do. So this was the part where I was still adding in some of the flowers, some of the, you kind of just keep working. I look back at it and I'll see maybe it needs a little something here or there, add a little yellow, more yellow into the centers, add another flower, layer the flowers, that kind of thing. Working on the fronts of the drawers was definitely a little more challenging because there's so many little raised areas, indented areas, and so you just want to try and make those lines come together. And so when you're coming down or going up, sometimes just slowing down at that point so that it matches up evenly and that your stems come together. I also used a blue ice brush. I believe that's what I'm using here. It was a flat one. I think it was a number 10. I'll have to put all the items in the notes on here, but using it on its end instead of flat, it was a perfect brush to make these stems. Also went a little bit bigger on the front of the dresser, so going up higher into the tops of the drawers, I brought those stems up a little bit higher, and also trying not to make both sides of the dresser the same, making it look definitely like a hand-painted item instead of something that was maybe a transfer or something like that. Don't get me wrong, I love my transfers, but this was definitely something I wanted to look like it was hand-painted and not just applied. So I let the whole thing dry overnight, at least one day, and then I went back, and now I'm using Big Top over the entire piece, and you can see how it really gives life to this piece. Big Top or any top coat over top of the DIY paint will draw out the true color of this paint, and it's almost like magic as you apply the Big Top over top of your piece. So I finished up this first coat of Big Top, and then I added a second coat and probably a third and fourth coat to the top of this dresser. I just like to do that normally on the tops just because they get a little bit more wear and tear. I used the original hardware, which was amazing because it actually had little daisies on it, if you can see it here. Cleaned it up with Brasso and it was beautiful. This painting really inspired me, and I just encourage you, try to find something that inspires you and then go for it. And I always say, what's the worst thing that can happen? You might have to paint over it, but it might just turn out to be something amazing and really pull you out of your box. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it inspires you. If you haven't already, like and subscribe to my channel. I appreciate it. I really want to help inspire others to get creative, and so just get out there and get a paintbrush and try something new. It's a lot of fun. Happy creating, everybody, and have a great day.